2019 has had an interesting start to it for the wrestling world. We've lost Mean Gene Okerlund, who, if you're anybody probably from the age of, I'll say 25, actually 30 to 30 plus, he was the soundtrack of your youth in wrestling. Every important interview that was ever done was done by Gene. And I know I've heard interviews that guys like Bret Hart have done, probably among several others, saying that while they weren't comfortable doing interviews, Gene always got them through it, helped them through it, helped them get better. Nobody was better on the stick in a backstage interview than Gene Okerlund. And it's a terrible way to start the year with the loss of a true legend. Because really, I watched WCW as a kid, but I was always more of a WWE guy. The three main voices of my childhood. Well, 3 of the 5, okay. Gorilla Monsoon, Bobby Heenan, Gene Okerlund are gone. Vince McMahon is still around. He did commentary when I was a kid. And Jesse Ventura is somewhere, but he is still with us, I think. Who knows with Jesse? But it's been a bit of a interesting last week. It's been an interesting start to my year. Very busy. I'm not going to dive too much into the pre-recorded Raw, SmackDown, and even NXT this week. I'll kick up with that next week once we start getting more relevant, the first relevant 2019 content. I do hope that we don't have to wait till the Royal Rumble to find out where the NXT call-ups are going. I do believe that, in my opinion, Lars Sullivan and Lacey Evans are headed to Raw, where EC3, Heavy Machinery, and Nikki Cross are going to go to SmackDown Live, which I really like. Number one, Nikki Cross belongs on SmackDown with Sanity. Heavy Machinery will be a great addition to the SmackDown Tag Division. And honestly, I really want to see EC3 versus AJ Styles. It's a feud that we never got in TNA, and missed opportunity that I hope WWE capitalizes on. If EC3 ends up on Raw, I hope they put him with Drake Maverick. Capitalize on that already established relationship that they have from TNA. I think that would be a natural fit. But I have to say, I'm a little bit of a frustrated wrestling fan right now, because I read Twitter and I read people's comments, and I don't think people understand what a push in wrestling is. A push does not mean you win your match every week. A push does not mean you are granted a championship. A push means you get television time. You're in a relevant storyline. I see people complaining that superstars aren't getting this, superstars aren't getting that, superstars aren't getting this or that. And it frustrates me because we don't know what's going on backstage. We don't know if there's a reason they're not getting what we may want. We don't know what the long-term payoff is, if there is a long-term payoff. And the other thing is, and Damian Sandow said it on a podcast before, because people used to complain about the Mizdow thing initially. If the superstar themselves are happy in their position, who are we as wrestling fans to say that things should be different. For all we know, Finn Balor could be happy with the push he is getting, because he is getting a push. He's getting plenty of TV time. He's in relevant storylines. Okay, has he not gotten the Universal title back? No. Does that suck? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, yes, he is one of the best wrestlers in the company, but you can't define a push by wins and losses and championships. That's not what a push is about. If you think that's what a push is about, then you're not a wrestling fan. I don't know what you are, but you're not a wrestling fan if you think a push is equivalent to wins and losses and championships. That's just a cold hard fact. But as far as the fresh start, people need to give it time. I don't think you're really going to see what the fresh start's going to bring until you start seeing this week's shows, the first shows of 2019. I think that's when the fresh start's really going to pick up. But the one thing that they really need to do within the fresh start to make it feel like a fresh start, they got to get the title off Brock Lesnar. I have no problem with Brock being in the company, Brock being a special feature, but he doesn't need the championship. The championship needs to be around. And what I mean by that is not... The championship doesn't need to be... Or the champion, rather, doesn't need to be on Raw or SmackDown every week. I think if they are on Raw or SmackDown every week, it oversaturates the belt. Now, Brock Lesnar's taken it to the other extreme. He's never around, and it devalues the belt. And the early days of Raw, for those people that remember I'll say 1993 to 96, 97-ish, the champion wasn't on Raw every week. The champion would be on Raw maybe once, twice a month. But they advertised it the week prior that, hey, Psycho Sid, Yokozuna, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels will be on Raw next week. It gave fans a reason to tune in. I think if you put them on the show every week, it oversaturates the title. I think that's one of the things that the Attitude Era did wrong. People talk so fondly about the Attitude Era, and yes, some of the storylines were really, really good. Some of the superstars were really, really good. But as far as the in-ring wrestling product, speaking as someone who lived through the Attitude Era sucked. It really did. The matches were horrible for the most part. I mean, you'd get your occasional gem every once in a while, but the Attitude Era reminds me of a drunk who can barely remember something from the next day, but his perception of everything that happened, he remembers everything so fondly. But in reality, if you go back and show him what he or she did when he was drunk, it wasn't all that memorable. And, we are lucky, and it's not just WWE. It's, New Japan, probably All Elite 2 when it happens. We are in the midst of some of the best wrestling in-ring matches that I've ever seen in the 30 years I've watched wrestling. Do they need to change up the matchups? Do they need to give us something new, especially on the WWE end of things? Sure. But we're starting to see that. We've seen Tyler Breeze versus Dean Ambrose. We've seen Apollo Crews versus Dean Ambrose. We saw Apollo Crews look dominant in a battle royal. So that's why I say, give the fresh start a chance. But the biggest thing they need to do in the fresh start, they need to Give the mid-card champions real storylines, real opportunities. Let the mid-card titles feel like they mean something again. You know, if you go back to the 90s and even before that, there were a lot of times where the Intercontinental Champion was the best performer in the company. Bret Hart, Rick Rude, Mr. Perfect, Shawn Michaels, Chris Jericho. The list goes on and on. And they would put on some of the best matches and have some of the best storylines. You know, Roddy Piper, probably one of his best matches in his career. WrestleMania 8, Bret Hart for the Intercontinental title. Just give the mid-card titles more of a spotlight. Let them be important again. Anyway, that's all I got for right now. Check it out, view it. I am going to try to, like I said, I'm going to try to do some show reviews on Sundays. I think I'm going to talk about my top 10 power rankings for the superstars across all brands, WWE wise, on Sundays for the previous week. Alright, well guys, check it out. Thanks.